Okay, welcome back to Chapter Seven's breakdown of Atlas Shrugged. So we've done 1 through 6, and if you made it through Chapter 7 and you're doing this with me, good on for you. I mean, this is 50, about close to 50 pages, this chapter, and either that or it's 50 pages exactly. And the chapter itself is 5% of this entire 1,000-page book. So if you did that, good for you. And if you made it here, you're almost 20% deep. So you got to keep going. Now, the chapter 7 is called The Exploiters and the Exploited. So Dagny's now deep into this building of the line. And I think she's a few months deep. And everything's going fairly smoothly. She's busting her beans. She's going heavy in the paint. And they're getting this Rio Norte line fixed with Rearden Metal. And it hasn't been all easy, but they've been making it work. And so she's standing there looking at this mountainside in Colorado, because she's going back and forth from New York to Colorado. So New York's where her main office is at Taggart Transcontinental. And Dagny's going back and forth. And she's going to Colorado to check on these rails. And it's wintertime. And she sees part of the bridge that they're working on. They're creating a bridge there to hold up the railroad so they can cross this split, this gap. She let her eyes follow the green-blue rails that started from the derricks, like an arm of naked bones and nerves. All right, so like an arm of naked bones and nerves is the crane that she saw. The green-blue rails were from the track, the railroad track. So an arm of naked bones and nerves. So they're really stripping things back. Makes me think of the death card. We're getting down to the bones. We're getting down to the skeleton. The skeleton is a representation of the immortal soul. And now we have the exploiters and the exploited. So people are being stripped down. We're starting to see more and more things for what they are, it would seem to me. And the death card is the perfect place where something has to be transformed. We have to change the way we're doing things. So the death tarot card is just, like some sort of point in a story, some archetypal piece of construction we can link to. A tractor went past her loaded with green-blue bolts. She could see men working, their arms stiff with the tension of their muscles. So the engineer, Dan Neely, he's working on this project. Remember, McNamara dropped out on them, and Dan Neely took over as head engineer. This guy, he's not that great, but he's getting the job done, right? Like, he's a body. He's a contractor. He can do the job. And Dagny's an engineer. So, they're building this railroad, and there's green, blue bolts, green, blue, green, blue. So we got ice. We have blue, which is related to, I think, Mercury there. And then we have Saturn, which is green. I may make a video about that separate of this because it's kind of longer, but I went into the green ray in my last video. So check that out. And so they're highlighting it again, this green blue stuff that's attached to Rearden Metal. Far at the bottom, she could distinguish the dim outlines of a dry riverbed of piled boulders of trees contorted by centuries. So that's at the bottom of a gorge. So this big split in the rock that they're building this bridge over. And the bridge, to me, represents Rearden and Dagny coming together. The fact that it's broken and not fixed means that we haven't really merged the male and female principle of the story yet. Rearden's, asceticism, which we're going to dig into more, his strict self-discipline lifestyle, and Dagny's, more masculine energy as she, dominates men in the workplace. So there's sort of like an interplay between these. And there's a connection growing between Dagny and Rearden, which we'll start to see in this chapter. And so Dagny is like looking at this bridge and, looking at how it's connected. And these guys are swinging on cables and trying to hook it up. They were metal switches of the kind that were scattered in thousands unnoticed throughout the country. but these were sparkling in the sun, and the sparks were greenish blue. So again, greenish blue light, greenish blue sparks. There's just beating us over the head with green blue with Rearden Metal. Mr. Mowen, president of the Amalgamated Switch Company, Switch and Signal Company. But Miss Taggart, my dear Miss Taggart, my company has served your company for generations. So he goes on here and he basically tells her, like, listen, I'd love to help you out, but with Rearden Metal, I can't make these switches that you need. So she needs these railroad switches, right? You got to be able to switch the track so that the train can go left, right, whatever. Another train can go around. So she needs these switch boxes, and she wants them made of Rearden Metal. Obviously, she's working with Rearden. She's going for Rearden Metal. And this guy's basically like, can't do it, sorry. So then she's doing her work and she looks over and she happens to spot Ellis Wyatt. Now, Ellis Wyatt's the guy that went to her office a few chapters ago and basically blasted her because he's the guy that's causing so much production to come out of Colorado. He's got a lot that needs to be shipped on her trains, and he is there checking out the process, and she notices him and she goes up to him. And he says, "Hello, Dagny." In a single shock of emotion, she knew everything the two words were intended to tell her. It was forgiveness, understanding, acknowledgement. It was a salute. So he didn't have much faith in her before. He was pretty pissed off about her brother James's management of the situation. And now he's pretty happy because she's getting this job done. They're going to finish on time if things continue to go the way they're going. And so he's pretty excited. She laughed like a child in happiness that things should be as right as that. And I love that. Like there's this innocence of a child there, this childlike innocence, that things can also be simple, that there can just be respect and things can be buried under the bridge once you see that production is happening. So she talks to Ellis Wyatt, all this stuff happens. She goes and talks to her engineer, Dan Neely, who wasn't that great, like I said. And then she spots someone else pulling up in a new car, beautiful new car. And so, we wonder who that is. A black two-seater, sparkling and new. A new car was an astonishing sight anywhere. So there's only a few people who astonished Dagny, and that's about Danconia and Rearden, right? One did not see them often. So she sees Rearden there at the job site, and she goes down to talk to him. She hasn't seen him since the party, and we know all the crap that went down at that party. So she goes to see Rearden, and she's pretty, nervous a little bit, but then she sees him and everything's like cool, calm. Everything between them is good. He tells her, listen, if you decide to quit the railroad, I'll give you a job. She tells him, you're only half kidding, Hank. I think you'd like it if having me ask you for a job, having me for an employee instead of a customer, giving me orders to obey. So things she can submit to, submitting to the control of Rearden. He says, yes, I would. So already he's kind of painting a bit of truth, right? Like there's something else going on here and it's playing itself out through their work banter. So Dagny's been trying to get this bridge built, but they're basically saying that in order to use Rearden Metal, her chief engineer, Dan Neely, drew up a thing and it would cost her $2 million. So she's just going to have to fix this bridge. She can't build it, she can't afford the $2 million. So what's happening is that because she can't afford the $2 million and her engineer gave her some weak drawing, he didn't even really try, and she decides there's nothing I can do. So Rearden comes to the site and he's like, listen, I'm focused on that bridge. And she's like, yeah, my people told me it would be $2 million to use Rearden Metal to get that bridge going. And he says, are you kidding me? Like, how about 800,000? And she's like, now that I like the sound of, because I can afford 800,000 and we can get a new bridge and it will help us out long term because Rearden Metal is way stronger than steel and way stronger than any of these horizontal beams we're going to put across, right, to try to brace this thing. They were sitting on a pile of frozen lumber. So there's always this hint of coldness around Rearden. But it's this Saturnian coldness, the frozen quality of Saturn is this icy cold of a lack of emotion, but it's also like this necessary energy, right? This this coldness of being businesslike and powerful. And, there's something attractive about it, this iciness to him. And they keep playing with it. So they're sitting on this pile of frozen lumber that her legs were pressed to the rough planks, and she could feel the cold through her thin stockings. They were bent together over a few scraps of paper, which could make it possible for thousands of tons of freight to cross a cut of empty space. So the paper's got all the drawings for the new bridge, his calculations that Rearden's doing. And so the ideas, the concepts on this paper are valuable, is what they're saying. He's explaining thrusts and pulls. You know what I mean? I mean, it's getting a little sexual, right? Like you can pick up on it, you might not pick up on it, but I mean, now you will if you're thinking of it with me. Like, yeah, he's explaining the bridge, and I think the bridge is, an outward manifestation of something they're trying to build together, because they go from repairing a bridge to getting rid of it and putting in a new one. So what does that tell you? A connection between them and an even more stronger bridge. So getting rid of the old structure is actually better than trying to repair this outdated, broken system, which was, if you remember, what I was saying about maybe D'Anconia's plan is forget this whole thing. I will crash it for them. I'll throw this communism crap down their throat by hatching my own plan. I'll play along, I'll win at their game, and then I'll build it myself. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. She remembered suddenly their last meeting at the party, their ease with each other, the strange lightheaded feeling which included the knowledge that it was the only sense of ease either of them had found anywhere. So yeah, I mean, they have a flow with each other that works so well, but it was so awkward at the party because obviously Rearden hates his wife. He's miserable with her. She's an outward reflection of all the things he can't face within himself. And so he's projected it onto her, and now he's playing with that. He's torturing himself with this outward manifestation. Hank, do you think we can build it in time? There are only 6 months left. I'll get the metal rolled if I have to throw every other order out of the mills. You'll get it rolled on so short a notice? Who do you think you're talking to? Orrin Boyle, which I thought was funny because obviously Orrin Boyle is the bum who couldn't get the Taggarts their metal and was blaming the fact that Rearden had cornered the market, so he wants to push this equalization of opportunity bill so that Rearden has to share all of his resources with all of these unproductive people like Orrin Boyle, who's playing politics. What are you doing in Colorado? He smiled, looking at a mining property. What sort? Copper. But the supply of copper is becoming completely unreliable, Rearden says. There doesn't seem to be a single first-rate company left in the business in this country. And I don't want to deal with D'Anconia Copper. I don't trust that playboy. So now we have Rearden wanting to go into copper because he needs this stuff. He needs, obviously, the metal for either Rearden Metal or for other things that he's doing. And they talk about how basically the country's going to crap and that people aren't reliable at all. And Dagny asks him, Hank, what's wrong with the country? And he says, I don't know. She says, I keep thinking of what they told us in school about the sun losing energy, growing colder each year. I remember wondering then what it would be like in the last days of the world. I think it would be like this, growing colder and things stopping. So again, the sense that we're growing colder, the sense that things are freezing, stopping, that everything is, that the structures are coming down and everything's being brought to a standstill. All the production is done, right? That's what happens in winter. You get the freeze, nature stops producing, we go into a dormant period. He pointed at the column of smoke. There's your new sunrise. It's going to feed the rest. So Rearden's still hopeful and optimistic about all the industrialism. He smiled. He looked down at the rail, then let his eyes move along the track up the sides of the mountains to the distant crane. She saw two things as if for a moment the two stood alone in her field of vision, the lines of his profile and the green-blue cord coiling through space. So the green-blue cord, I think, is the rail tracks here, right? He says, we've done it, haven't we? Yes, we have, she says. Their achievement, she thought, in one moment of acknowledging it, of possessing it together, what greater intimacy could one share? So here they are. They're going to finish on time. Ellis Wyatt's pumped up. He's excited. They're sharing this very intimate moment. Now she was free for the simplest, most commonplace concerns of the moment, because nothing could be meaningless within her sight. So because they've accomplished this, or they're seemingly about to accomplish it, everything's exciting for them. And so right now at the beginning of the chapter, everything's going good. We're on pace. So Rearden tells her, listen, I got to go. I'm flying out tonight. I got to go back to the East Coast. And she's like, oh, well, can I fly back with you? And he says, I'm not flying back to New York. I'm going to Minnesota. And she's like, all right, all right. So she goes to a local Air Force base or whatever. Actually, a local airport, sorry, in a desolate chain of mountains. So desolate. Now they're painting the picture because Rearden left, she's lonely, right? It's a desolate airport. A lonely attendant came to meet her. So lonely, desolate, lonely, a lonely attendant. Ayn Rand's driving home the point now that, without Rearden, she's feeling alone. So the pilot or, the attendant comes over and he says, it's a pity you didn't get here a bit sooner. Mr. Rearden took off for New York in his private plane just a little while ago. So he just lied to her and told her he was going to Minnesota, even though he's actually going to New York. And she gets to the airport and finds out that he blew her off and lied to her. And she's like, why is he lying to me? What's the difference? Obviously, we know there's some buried sexual tension here, right? There's stuff going on beneath the surface, right? All right, so then things get a little frustrating for me because Dagny and James are going to this dinner where Dagny's supposed to speak in front of the New York Business Council. She looked at the streets of New York and thought of the race between metal and time, between the rails of the Rio Norte Line and the passing days. So Dagny, her brother conned her into having to go give a talk on Rearden Metal to his investors. And he's kind of nervous about it. He's like, we kind of need you to convince them and all these other people in the room, the New York Business Council, that Rearden Metal's good stuff. And so she's like, fine, I'll do it. I'll go talk to them. No big deal. That report of the Special Committee of the National Council of Metal Industries, what do you think of it? James Taggart asked her. They said Rearden Metal is a threat to public safety. They said its chemical composition is unsound, it's brittle, it's decomposing molecularly. So at the molecule level, right? The smallest particle at the smallest level that we can possibly conceive, the molecular level, right? Rearden Metal is supposedly decomposing. It's not as strong as we think, which I think is basically them sort of hinting that there's a bit of weakness in Rearden, that even though he's so strong, there's still a chink in the armor. Not necessarily something wrong with his product materially, but something wrong with him. And it's being played out through this. And the decomposing molecularly is telling us, hey, again, the death card, the skeleton arm of the crane, we're getting down to the bones of this thing. Things are coming down and decomposing. I don't think it's actually Rearden Metal, but I think they're mislabeling what it is. It's not that's coming down. So she's basically, what are you talking about? Who cares about this crap? Why are you listening to these morons? And Taggart's like, they're experts, though. And Dagny says, who's the president of the National Council of Metal Industries, Jim? Orrin Boyle, isn't it? So he's also talking about how the National Council of Metal Industries talked crap about Rearden Metal. And it's like, well, Orrin Boyle is the president of that, and Orrin Boyle doesn't like Rearden. So it's a hit piece, right? These people aren't friends. He's Orrin Boyle's competition. Of course, Orrin Boyle is going to throw him through the ringer, right? She looked up at a street lamp on the corner. It was a globe of glass filled with light. It hung secure from storm, lighting boarded windows and cracked sidewalks as their only guardian. So now we see a bit of light on the way to this thing. And we see how the light itself is shining on a broken world. And then we find out that the Phoenix Durango, the railroad that James Taggart basically had shut down because he came out with that National Council of Railroads and whatever. Um, he had them basically pass the anti-dog eat dog rule, which said that only one rail line can operate there, and the oldest one gets to be the one. And so he's got the oldest rail line, even though the Phoenix Durango is doing the best business. So he finds out that the Phoenix Durango guy, Dan Conway, is not going to sell him this railroad because obvious reasons he screwed him over. And Dan Conway's like, screw, man, I'm going to sell all the parts of this railroad to people, other people. They can pick it all apart. And Jim tries to get Washington involved and all this other stuff, and it doesn't work on this occasion. He can't get everybody back on it, and all the people from the council, the National Association of Railroads or whatever, they're out picking this guy's railroad clean themselves. They're like, we need the parts, we need the pieces, we'll take it. So he can't get them to help him out anymore. You'd better do a good job of defending Rearden Metal because Bertram Scudder can get pretty sarcastic. Bertram Scudder, Dagny says. You'll be able to beat him, won't you? To beat him. So Dagny's like, what do you mean beat him? It's going to be a radio broadcast. You're going to debate him with him the question, is Rearden Metal a lethal product of greed? Stop the car, she yells. So she realizes this isn't a talk she's giving. It's a debate she's been signed up for. And she tells him, you goddamn fool, do you think I consider their question debatable? Which obviously we know it's not debatable. These people, you can't reason with unreasonable and irrational people who have already made up their minds. And she knows this. So she was walking slowly, normally, and it was strange to feel iced stone under the thin soles of black satin sandals. So there we go again. Iced stone. There's something cold about this whole thing that's going on, right? Here it is. It's wintertime. There's snow covering the mountains. Rearden's icy cold himself. We have this breakdown and stoppage of society, this freeze. And she gets out of the car and she's like, I am not debating this person. She goes walking on the street and James is like, what the hell? You leave me high and dry. I was pretty upset because I wanted to hear her come out with some really cool, rational stuff, even though I know in reality she made the right choice. She doesn't go back. If you've read the chapter, you know she does not go back to debate him. It's pretty annoying. Like I said, I was hoping that the chapter would take a turn and she would go and ream this Bertram Scudder clown, but maybe there's more time for that, right? There's a whole another 870 pages. So she goes into this diner, which is compared to, like a plant or blades of grass growing out from beneath a dead giant. So again, reinforcing death. She saw the sky through the naked steel skeleton, which was an old office building. So now this office building is being compared to a naked steel skeleton. So they're really beating this point home, right? This death card, this transformative phase. We're going to go through a transformation. We're going to go through the death of something, whether that's innocence or ego or all, certain things are going to have to go and a change is going to have to occur. So the icy cold of death, right? Then she's in this diner and says the warm air made her realize in simple gratitude that she had been cold. So it's like only when we finally feel warmth again do we realize, wow, I was actually freezing out there. So there's people in this diner that she ends up stopping in. The men looked at her without curiosity. They did not seem astonished to see a woman in evening clothes enter a slum diner. Nothing astonished anyone these days. The owner turned impassively to fill her order. There was in his stolid indifference the kind of mercifulness that asks no questions. Stolid meaning having or showing little or no emotion. So he's indifferent, which is basically no emotion, no care either way, apathy, and it's like emotionlessness, right? But there's a mercifulness there to this person. So she stops in and there's like this bit of reprieve going on. And this bum starts talking to her who's sitting at the counter, and he says, "It's no use, lady." And Dagny replies, "It isn't? No, forget it. You're only fooling yourself. About what? About anything being worth a damn. It's dust, lady. All of it. Dust and blood. Don't believe the dreams they pump you full of, and you won't get hurt." What dreams? The stories they tell you when you're young about the human spirit. There isn't any human spirit. Man is just a low-grade animal without intellect, without soul, without virtues and moral values. An animal with only two capacities: to eat and reproduce. So Saturn is like this high level, these 7 steps, these discipline, concentration, focus, all these things, right? That get us to the throne of the sun, which we'll talk about at a different time. It's too complex to go over just while in a chapter analysis. And so basically the Saturn part is this like higher faculties. And then you have the Martian part, the Mars, the planet Mars. And that's the animalistic, the desire. It's not really capable of focusing too long on any one thing, except it can concentrate when it comes to its desire, but these are still animal passions. And I personally don't think it's right to vilify those things. To eat and reproduce, obviously survival mechanisms. And then there's, virtues, soul, values, all of these things are, at times subjective, but the spirit itself is subjective, right? The closer we get to spirit, the more abstract and subjective things seem to get. He says, you go through life looking for beauty, for greatness, for some sublime achievement, he said, and what do you find? A lot of trick machinery for making upholstered cars or inner spring mattresses. So he's like, this is a trick. It's false. It's BS. They sell you these gadgets and they make you think things are awesome, but really it's empty. Matter. That's all men know or care about. It doesn't take any morality to turn out a 10-ton truck on an assembly line. What does matter? What is morality? She asked. Judgment to distinguish right and wrong, vision to see the truth, courage to act upon it, dedication to do that which is good, integrity to stand by the good at any price. But where does one find it? Who is John? The young boy made a sound. Who is John Galt? So there's a young boy at the other edge of the counter listening to this, and he hits him with the who is John Galt? Where does one find morality? I thought that was a really good definition, right? Vision to see the truth, courage to act upon it, dedication to that which is good, integrity to stand by good at any price. It's almost like a good thing to memorize, right? This kid says, I know who is John Galt, or rather a tramp, a person who travels about on foot and begs or does odd jobs for money, but is probably homeless, right? Says, I know who is John Galt. It's a secret, but I know it. And so Dagny's like, I've been through this freaking crap before, right? Last chapter. Who? She asked without interest. An explorer, said the tramp. The greatest explorer that ever lived. The man who found the fountain of youth. So that's a pretty cool thing, right? This person now is saying John Galt found the fountain of youth. So first he found Atlantis. Now he finds the fountain of youth. John Galt spent years looking for it. He crossed oceans and he crossed deserts and he went down into forgotten mines, miles under the earth. But he found it on top of a mountain. It took him 10 years to climb that mountain. It broke every bone in his body. It tore the skin off his hands. So again, the breakage of bones, the getting back to the bones, it made him lose his home, his name, his love. But he climbed it. He found the fountain of youth, which he wanted to bring down to men, only he never came back. Why didn't he, she asked? Because he found that it couldn't be brought down. Wow, so he gives up everything. He loses everything to find the fountain of youth. He finds it at the top of a mountain. Dagny started the chapter next to the mountains. He loses the skin off his hands, and they compared the crane in the beginning to a naked skeleton arm with just nerves and arms. So still capable of feeling, even though there's just bones there. Now, it took a decade to climb that mountain, and D'Anconia was gone for a decade, right? So we don't know much about John Galt, but there's now a lot of speculation. And clearly, whatever he represents now, at first he represented an unknown. And now he represents somebody who has found things that have been hidden, things that have been baffling others. He is the conqueror of those things. He's the guy that's going out, finding them, discovering them. But the problem with all of them is he can't bring Atlantis to people. He can't bring the Fountain of Youth to people. So then we end up in Rearden's office now. We're skipping around in this chapter. And in Rearden's office, there's a guy there who's kind of vague, and he's being stealthy, but, openly so, kind of. And he's from the Science Institute. He was Dr. Potter, who held some undefined position with the State Science Institute. So he's basically there beating around the bush, not telling Rearden what he wants. The light was growing dim in the broad windows of the office. So again, we have the darkening happening. We have a descent into darkness. Things are growing dim. They've been growing dim since last chapter, right? When we saw the language being used there. The State Science Institute represents the best brains of the country, Mr. Rearden. He doesn't talk like that, this guy. The State Science Institute represents the best brains of the country, Mr. Rearden. So I'm told. Surely you do not want to pit your own judgment against theirs. I do. So this guy asked Rearden to stop and delay his thing because, the State Science Institute, government institution, wants him to, doesn't want to disrupt the economy and, would throw things out of balance. We don't want that. Just a temporary delay, just to give our economy a chance to get stabilized. If you'd only wait for a couple of years, you want me to take Rearden Metal off the market. Why? Only a few years, Mr. Rearden, only until... Did your scientists decide that Rearden Metal is not what I claim it is? We have not committed ourselves to that. Did they decide it's no good? It is the social impact of a product that we must be considered. We are concerned with the public welfare and the terrible crisis of the present moment, which is Rearden Metal good or not? Is Rearden Metal good? So, Rearden's like, pushing for an answer. At a time of desperate steel shortage, we cannot afford to permit the expansion of a steel company which produces too much, because it might throw out of business the companies which produce too little, thus creating an unbalanced economy, which... Are you going to answer my question? Questions of value are relative. If Rearden Metal is not good, it's a physical danger to the public. If it is good, it's a social danger. So you see that? They don't care that his product's good because they don't want to disrupt the social order, their friends, their agenda. They want to take your means and have it for themselves. So the Science Institute does not approve of the appearance of Rearden Metal on the metallurgical scene at the present time. And then Rearden's like, okay, this meeting's over. Goodbye. You're not gonna do this all day long. We've already been over this. I'm not shutting down production. And so he goes, I am in a position to speak of large sums of money, government money. So now he wants to buy Rearden Metal. So first he wants him to delay it and not go through with it at all. And now he wants the government to buy and basically steal his thing. Oh, we have large sums of money. We're going to steal it. And then it's government owned, the strongest metal, period. We really trust the government with that? If you do, you need to read your history a little bit. So we are offering you a blank check on what is, as you realize, an unlimited account. What else can you want? Name your price. The sale of the rights to Rearden Metal is not open to discussion. And the guy's like, what do you mean it's not open to discussion? And he says, why do you want to struggle for years rather than accept a fortune for Rearden Metal? Why? And Rearden says, because it's mine. Do you understand the word? And so basically he tells this guy, no, it's mine. I invented it. Why should I give you a piece of me? I'm not a sellout. So Rearden's telling you, I'm not selling out. I'm not taking money for this product. This guy, Dr. Parter, comes back at him. I think I must tell you that the Science Institute may issue an official statement condemning Rearden Metal. That is their privilege. Such a statement would make things more difficult for you, undoubtedly. This is not the day for people who refuse to cooperate. In this age, one needs friends. You are not a popular man, Mr. Rearden. What are you trying to say? Society is a complex structure. So the State Science Institute is a government organization, Mr. Rearden. There are certain bills pending in the legislature which may be passed at any moment. Businessmen are peculiarly vulnerable these days. I am sure you understand me. And Rearden's like, no, I don't understand you. Like, I don't care about your bills. I don't care about your BS. I'm working here. But of course, in Washington, they have a whole different agenda. And that's going to be explained later in this chapter, which is great. So then we go back to Mr. Mowen's, and Dagny trying to get the switches going. The Amalgamated Switch and Signal Company had suddenly given notice that they could not complete her order. For sole explanation, too many people don't like it. It was useless to argue, she thought, and to wonder about people who would neither refute an argument nor accept it. So basically, these people said, we're canceling your order of the switches. We're not going through with it. And now she's like, I'm screwed. I need to be able to get these switches from my railroad in order to complete on time. And now we're back to square one with that, because these guys probably have been gotten to by the government, who are like, if you go forward with this, we're going to come down on you hard. Obviously, the State Science Institute was banging down his door. The State Science Institute, he said quietly, so Eddie Willers is now talking, has issued a statement warning people against the use of Rearden Metal. It was on the radio. It's in the afternoon papers. What did they say? Dagny says. The words were forced out of him by the unbelieving, bewildered indignation of a child screaming in denial at his first encounter with evil. So finally, right, we're coming around to the fact that Dagny and Rearden are having to see that something else is operating. It's like, I don't know how they can miss it being so productive, but I guess if you're just heads down and you're working, sometimes you actually believe that there's nothing more malicious going on, that people can be just stupid or incompetent, but really there's these sick agendas at play. And then we have the first encounter with evil like a child. So again, the laughter of a child, being child. With death comes birth. So getting back to the essence of something. So this is what they wrote, because Eddie Willers is saying we can't refute this. They didn't even state a single fact. They didn't say anything. They didn't condemn it. They did not condemn it. They didn't really say anything. So here's what they said. It may be possible that after a period of heavy usage, a sudden fissure may appear, though the length of this period cannot be predicted. The possibility of a molecular reaction at present unknown cannot be entirely discounted. Although the tensile strength, so how long the metal can be stretched, of the metal is obviously demonstrable, certain questions in regard to its behavior under unusual stress are not to be ruled out, although there is no evidence to support the contention that the use of the metal should be prohibited. A further study of its properties would be of value. So this government organization wanted to buy this metal themselves, and now they've just written a hit piece to damage the metal that they're using to build this Rio Norte line and save their thing. Dagny, it's the State Science Institute. So he's like, they basically screwed us. They're a big name with a lot of clout, and they just hit us over the head. Eddie gathered his strength and said in the tone of a military report, Taggart stock has crashed. Ben Neely quit, so her lead engineer quits. The National Brotherhood of Road and Track Workers has forbidden its members to work on the Rio Norte line, and James, her brother Jim, has left town. So holy crap. The stock of Taggart's destroyed because of this thing. That's crashed. All of a sudden, her brother's skipping town and all this stuff is happening. So see what this commie crap can do when they're going to shut down a good product because they want to be the ones to control it. They aren't being, he won't sell them his product, so they write a hit piece on it. This is the type of level of corruption we're dealing with. And now they're kind of screwed because now they don't have an engineer and all this other stuff. Dr. Stadler is the head of that institute. He is the institute. He must have known about it. He permitted it. So now we're figuring out Dr. Stadler is the guy who runs this science institute. At least he's the face of this thing. Dagny, he asks, his voice low, what is happening to people? It's such an obvious smear job. You'd think a decent person would throw it in the gutter. How could they accept it? What is it in people that lets them do this, and how can we live with it? So Eddie's like, this is crazy. Like, what kind of evil are we up against, right? And, how can people be so stupid as to fall for these tricks and to just listen to the State Science Institute all the time? Like, do your own research. But yeah, right. Come on now. Have you been living in the world we're living in the last few years? So the building of the State Science Institute stood over a river of New Hampshire. So beautiful up in New England, right? Beautiful. And there it is in a nice, quiet town, because of course they always are, right? They put their organizations in the most safe and respectable places you can put them. And so over the entrance, a dedication was cut into the marble to the fearless mind, to the inviolate truth. Now, what a crock of crap that is, right? To the fearless mind, to the inviolate truth. They are violating the truth all the time. So what's violated here? The truth is violated. Ayn Rand is telling us that, right? It was the inviolate and the violated, right? Oh, no, it was the exploiters and the exploited. At the age of 27, Dr. Robert Stadler had written a treatise on cosmic rays. At 32, he became head of the Department of Physics of the Patrick Henry University. Now, the Patrick Henry University is where the pirate came from in the last chapter, Ragnar Daneskjold. And also, Patrick Henry University is where Francisco d'Ancona went. So we find that out, right? A lot of things are going on at this Patrick Henry University. Some real stuff is going down. So the name of Dr. Robert Stadler acted upon the country like the cosmic rays he studied. So we talked about how Rearden was like the green ray of Saturn, and this like ultimate perfection of the individual as an individual before he merges again with spirit. So you have to know who you are before you merge back in completely, right? And now we've got these cosmic rays. We've got this spiritual substance now entering in that he's studying. She, meaning Dagny, had met Dr. Stadler on a few occasions. He had said to her once, I never expect to encounter intelligence. That I should find it here is such an astonishing relief. So she even astonishes this extremely brilliant guy, Dr. Stadler. And she goes in and she's like, why did you guys write this hit piece? How could you not have known about it? And he's like, I didn't read it. I don't read it. I didn't get it. They didn't send it to me. It stinks, but I didn't read it. And, he's kind of beating around the bush, and she's like, listen, I'll submit to you all the information necessary to form a conclusive judgment. He says, I cannot issue any public statements about it. And she's like, well, I kind of need you to. And she's like, why can't you? And he says, the situation is much too complex to explain in a casual discussion. And she says, but if you should find that Rearden Metal is, in fact, an extremely valuable product, which that is besides the point, he says. The value of Rearden Metal is besides the point. There are other issues involved besides questions of fact. So now this guy is telling us it's not just about the facts here, Dagny. Dr. Stadler, she asks, so you know the truth, yet you will not state it publicly? Miss Taggart, you are using an abstract term when we are dealing with a matter of practical reality. So now we realize that the truth is subjective here, right? When we're dealing with practical reality, we're not dealing with cosmic truth as it stands in its unbreakable natural form. We're dealing with a whole different species here. And Dagny says, we are dealing with a matter of science. And he says, science, aren't you confusing the standards involved? It is only in the realm of pure science that truth is an absolute criterion. When we deal with applied science, with technology, we deal with people. And when we deal with people, considerations other than truth enter the question. Wow. So we have a now pure science that deals with just truth. And then we have applied science, like technology. And dealing with people means considerations other than the truth enter the question. How can one deal in truth when one deals with the public? Is what he says. And she says, I don't understand you. Questions of truth do not enter into social issues. No principles have ever had any effect on society, he says. Dagny's like, well, what then directs men's actions? And he says, the expediency of the moment. Wow. So the doing or considering of what is selfish or whatever is of use or advantage rather than of what is right or just. That's the expediency of the moment. Wow. That gets crazy because this guy just revealed something very important that's going on in our world today in 2022. That social issues are not decided by truth. They're decided by someone's agenda. And the people who own the media and all this other stuff, right, have an agenda. And if their agenda is either good for you or bad for you, it's bad. And so what's happening here is this book is revealing in novel form all of this truth, almost in a way predicting, because it's seen what happened with Bolshevism in Russia. It's seen what happened with communism. Ayn Rand was there. Ayn Rand came here. Ayn Rand is a member of, is ethnically a part of the group who created communism. So it's like you have this person who's pretty in touch with it. She's writing a story about it now. And she's telling you, like, there's a difference. And here's the difference. This distinction is something we have to be like beat over our heads, because there is pure science, which deals with real truth. And then there is applied science. And when you start to bring people into the equation, somebody's agenda is going to win out. The truth becomes much more subjective. Dr. Stadler, she said, I am stopped in the name of public safety because I am using the best rail ever produced. So she explains to him, they're using public safety to screw me over. They're using this bullshit excuse of public safety when we know it's the safest product. And he's like agreeing that it's a good product. And so she's like, I don't get what, they're using this excuse to shut me down. And he's saying, listen, it's kind of tough shit, but that's the name of the game. Well, that may be vicious, unjust, calamitous, but such is life in society. Somebody is always sacrificed, as a rule, unjustly. There is no other way to live among men. What can any one person do, he says. And he's kind of hitting her with some real life truth. Like, she's kind of so rational that it's made her somewhat naive of the fact that not everybody plays by the same rules. And it's like D'Anconia seems to have known this. So she goes to leave, and he can't really help her, and she's kind of got this on her mind, and she's kind of baffled because she can't believe that, wow, the world is really screwed. And he comes over to her, not wanting her to leave. He wants her to understand what the hell's going on in this world. And he says, a tone of gentle, bitter persuasiveness in his voice, I am older than you. Believe me, there is no other way to live on earth. Men are not open to truth or reason. They cannot be reached by a rational argument. The mind is powerless against them. Wow, so men aren't open to reason. I think he's obviously right about, as a group and as a whole, most people are not rational. Most people are not reasonable. Yet we have to deal with them. If we want to accomplish anything, we have to deceive them into letting us accomplish it. So there's the trickery of machinery. There's the trickery of technology. There's the trickery of the social issue. We have to deceive them into letting us accomplish it, or force them. They understand nothing else. We cannot expect their support for any endeavor of the intellect, for any goal of the spirit. They are nothing but vicious animals. They are greedy, self-indulgent, predatory dollar chasers who, and then he kind of trails off. So, wow. So he lets her know these people that you're dealing with, the public, live by a different code. And so the more communist faction of the government uses their influence and power to manipulate these people into believing crap like we're just a bag of chemicals, we're worthless human beings. Yet We need to be so virtuous as to sacrifice ourselves for our neighbors, Mexico, and build them a line before we even have our own shit straight. It's nonsensical, right? Nobody would say, put your child's mask on so they can breathe on the airplane before you put yours on. It's like, no, you put yours on so you can help your child out. It's the same thing. You help yourself and your people and your family and your race and your country, and then you help others. Then you extend across the lines. But they've got it all corrupt. And so you have to ask yourself if expediency of the moment is what's winning out. If somebody's idea, if somebody's self-interest is winning out, is their self-interest in line with yours? And then you have to ask yourself, like, is the government's self-interest in line with your self-interest? And I mean, I don't think I need to spell it out for you, right? So, yeah, I mean, Rand is laying it out. She's smacking us over the face with it. This could be like fair warning here. Intelligence. It's such a rare, precarious spark that flashes for a moment somewhere among men and vanishes. One cannot tell its nature or its future or its death. So again, we've got this Dr. Stadler saying, I appreciate intelligence so much, but like it's so rare. Most people aren't intelligent. They don't use their thinking and rational faculties. And we don't know when it's going to die. And so he's hinting again, there's a death of the intelligence, of morality, of spiritual values going on. She's painting that picture in this chapter by saying there are people who are being exploited, and there are people who are doing the exploiting. So the sky was still the intense blue of evening. A lonely star low over Earth seemed unnaturally large and made the sky look darker. So we got the blue of evening, we got a star over the sky. And he says, I had three pupils. So, I mean, we got the star over the sky, over the water. We have the three almost wise men, right? Three wise men here. And is this some sort of Christian sort of play? Man, I mean, she is Jewish, so it makes sense. You know, Jews gave us Christianity. I'm not Christian, but, you know, Jews gave us Christianity, so gave Europe Christianity. And, you know, so there's that. And so, yeah, I had three pupils. So, I mean, what are we looking at? Some sort of like three wise man. He's giving her wisdom. They majored in two subjects, mine and Hugh Axton's physics and philosophy. So we know D'Anconia was in Hugh Axton's physics and philosophy class, rather. And this guy, Dr. Stadler, was teaching physics at Patrick Henry University. And these three people are like brilliant, bright students. He says, unlike the incredible creature whom the university has now put in his place, Axton and I were a little jealous of each other over these three students. I heard Axton saying one day that he regarded them as his sons. I resented it a little because I thought of them as mine. When I endorsed the establishment of this institute, one of the three damned me. These three men, these three who held all the hope which the gift of intelligence ever proffered, these three from whom we expected such a magnificent future. One of them was Francisco d'Anconia, who became a depraved playboy. Another was Ragnar Danishul, who became a plain bandit. So much for the promise of the human mind. Who was the third one? Dagny asked. He shrugged. The third one did not achieve even that sort of notorious distinction. He vanished without a trace into the great unknown of mediocrity. He is probably a second assistant bookkeeper somewhere. And so my fiance has said that she thinks that this could be John Galt, this mysterious third person, right? He's an unknown element. He's doing all this stuff, and somehow D'Anconia knows it's true. And how would D'Anconia know he found Atlantis or climbed to the top of the mountain and found the Fountain of Youth or whatever legends are coming up about with this guy if D'Anconia doesn't know this guy? Right? And D'Anconia seems to know what everybody's thinking. D'Anconia seems to have his hand on the pulse here. So Dagny gets this whole crazy experience with Dr. Stadler where she really gets woken up about communism and the agenda and what's going down. And so she goes to see her brother James, who's hiding out at her parents' old estate where they grew up. And he basically is like, I wasn't hiding, I wasn't doing this. There was melting snowflakes on her coat collar on the brim of her hat. So there's this icy cold, and she's sort of entering the warmth all the time. She's, connected to this snow, this ice, this Rearden, this Saturnian business principle, but then she's also seems to be like a warming factor, a passion, a desire, a flame lit in this dark world. And that's why maybe she sees the light illuminating this broken place, because she's almost seeing what she is to this. So a cold fireplace and the dismal warmth of an electric heater is what's lighting this place. So really bad warmth, not really a lot of vibrancy here for heat. And Dagny is like letting James go on. He's bitching. He's like, I didn't run away, and they did all this, and I tried to do this, and I tried to do that, but nothing's working. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so Dagny says, listen, I'm going to set up my own railroad company. I'm going to head it. You're going to let me take the full responsibility for the railroad. You're going to play nice in Washington and pretend like you've distanced yourself completely. Taggart stock will go back up. I will have Eddie Willers take my spot in the office. I will run things from New York. I'll come in once in a while. Nobody really will really know I'm vice president of operations. He's like, well, somebody's going to figure it out. And she's like, it doesn't matter because nobody will say it. And that's what she's realizing about all this Washington politics, is that nobody's going to say the truth. It's just nobody's willing to say Rearden Metal isn't good. They're not willing to say it is good. Nobody's going to say it. We're just going to keep pushing our agenda by putting up a front and a face to every single different person in the place. And so she's like, I don't care how many fronts you have to keep your Washington boys off my case. I'm going to come up with this whole line. I'm going to handle it. And Jim's like, wow, this is kind of good. It's giving me hope, but I still wish I could smack you over the head with something. But I need you to save my ass. And so he's like, well, what are you going to call your company? And she's like, the John Galt Line, she comes up with. And he's like, oh, you can't call it that. And she's like, no, I'm going to call it that. The earth was snow covered now, and what remained was like the skeleton of the countryside. She remembered a thin design of bare branches rising from the snow to the sky. So the skeleton of the countryside, the skeleton of the office building, the naked arm with the nerves, right? She's beaten at home. A thin design of bare branches of blah, blah, blah. It was gray and white like a photograph, a dead photograph, which one keeps hopefully for remembrance, but which has no power to bring anything back. So the way things were are not coming back. The old is now out. She's realized there is some evil in this world, and I'm going to, have to start to play a different game. I'm going to let my brother be the front man. I'm going to go do me, because I know I'm not going to play that Washington BS, but he's going to, and I'm going to save this rail line by making it look like he's not involved. I'm going to save my grandfather's company. I don't know, but the way people use it, they always seem to say it out of, and then Dagny goes, fear, despair, futility. And James is like, yes, that's what it is. And she says, that's what I want to throw in their faces. Then she hits him with a listen, Jim. And she looks fierce. And James is like, I hope I never see this look again. She says, keep your Washington boys off. Don't let them try to stop me. If they try, Jim, people say that our ancestor, Nat Taggart, killed the politician who tried to refuse him a permission he should never have had to ask. I don't know whether Nat Taggart did it or not, but I'll tell you this. I know he felt if he did. I know how he felt if he did. If he didn't, I might do the job for him to complete the family legend. I mean it, Jim. So she's not freaking screwing around. So then she has D'Anconia over, and he's sitting in front of the desk, and she's explaining to him why she formed this company and all this other stuff. His eyes looked to her attentively. They seemed to see more than she could suspect. They made her think of a one-way glass. They let all light rays in, but none out. So D'Anconia seems to have access to all the vision, but she's only got a part of it, and he can see more than he's letting on. And he's like, don't ask me what you're going to ask me, because I don't want to have to tell you no. And he's like, but I already know what you're going to ask me. And she says, I need $15 million to complete the line. I will issue bonds in the name of my new company in the amount of $8 million. I called you here to ask you to buy these bonds. So it's like, fuck, right? Like now she needs this 8 million from Danconia. She's like, you're depraved. You don't care anymore. Like, just give me the money. I'm begging. Like, I'm gonna be a beggar. Just let me have the money. You won't miss it anyways, and you're gonna make a return. You know, so he's like, no, not gonna do that. Not giving you your money. And 8 million. Remember, eight is a number associated with Saturn, kabbalistically. In 8 years, Rearden's been married to his wife, and he can make a bridge for 800,000. And now she's asking Danconia for 8 million. You see, I can't believe that you're really gone. The way you live is depraved, but the way you act is not. But I can't struggle to understand you any longer, she says. I'll give you a hint. Contradictions do not exist. Whenever you think that you are facing a contradiction, check your premises. You will find that one of them is wrong. So one of your assumptions must be wrong because there is no such thing as contradiction. Your premise has to account for the seemingly contradictory actions because there's one line of truth within there. This is a good quote, I thought. And I think that's Danconia's way of saying, you decide what you believe. Like, I'm either a depraved playboy who is a bum communist aligned with them, or the guy who I act like, And I thought of this and I'm like, judge a tree by the fruit it bears, right? Judge somebody by their actions. In the name of anything I ever meant to you, she whispered, anything left within you. So she's really begging. And he says, in the moment when the book says, Ayn Rand says, in the moment when she thought that she had seen this look before, that this was the way he had looked against the night glowing of the city, when he lay in bed by her side for the last time, she heard his cry, the kind of cry she had never torn from him before. My love, I can't. So he's like, I can't help you. I can't give you this money. Then, as they looked at each other, both shocked into silence by astonishment, she saw the changes in his face. And then he says, please excuse the mixture in my styles of expression. I've been supposed to say that to so many women, but on somewhat different occasions. So he plays it off like, nah, I wasn't actually calling you my love. It's not, this cry wasn't genuine, but there was something there, right? She says, all right, Francisco, it was a good act. I won't ask you for anything. And he says, I warned you. And she said, I didn't know which side you belong to. I didn't seem possible, but it's the side of Orrin Boyle and Bertram Scudder and your old teacher. And he's like, my old teacher? And she's like, Dr. Robert Styler, that guy from the Science Institute. And he chuckles and he's like, oh, that one. He's the looter who thinks that his end justifies his seizure of my means, which tells me Danconia knows he's working for, a government organization that wants to take his money to fund their research and his means, which is the BS that he's pushing. And that's why Danconia didn't agree with him in the first place. Dagny, I'd like you to remember which side you said I'm on someday. I'll remind you of it and ask you whether you'll want to repeat it. So he's letting her know I'm on your side. I mean, without saying it, right? He's like, do you really think, that I'm not there? He's like, he just called this guy a looter. Is he really on the side of them? And then Danconia says as he's leaving, if it could be built, I'd wish good luck to the Rio Norte line. She says, it's going to be built and it's going to be called the John Galt Line. And he's like, what? It was an actual scream. Dagny, in heaven's name, why? Don't you like it? How did you happen to choose that? It sounds better than Mr. Nemo or Mr. Zero, doesn't it? So Nemo, I was thinking like Omen backwards. I don't really get the reference there, I guess. Dagny, why that? Because it frightens you. What do you think it stands for? He asked. The impossible, the unattainable, and you're all afraid of my line just as you're afraid of that name. He started laughing. He laughed, not looking at her, and she felt strangely certain that he had forgotten her, that he was far away, that he was laughing in furious gaiety and bitterness at something in which she had no part. When he turned to her, he said earnestly, Dagny, I wouldn't if I were you. She shrugged. Jim didn't like it either. What do you like about it? He asked. I hate it. I hate the doom you're all waiting for, the giving up and that senseless question that always sounds like a cry for help. I'm sick of hearing pleas for John Galt. I'm going to fight him, she says. He said quietly, you are. And meaning she's already fighting him. And then she says, I'm going to build a railroad line for him. Let him come and claim it. He smiled sadly and nodded, he will. So Danconia knows something that's going on here. Danconia's working either with this mystery man or this pirate guy. There's three of them. They were all good friends. They all went to these same teachers. There's clearly something going on with all of them, right? So then we go back to Rearden, and he's back in his office handling business for the day. Rearden sat at his desk in the light of a single lamp. Beyond its circle, the darkness of the office blended with the darkness outside. So again, we're back to this dark and light theme with this guy. The shadows are just always off in the distance, creeping around it, and the light is getting dim. He's cold, blah, 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 right? He felt as if it were empty space where the rays of the furnaces moved at will, as if the desk were a raft hanging in midair, holding two persons imprisoned by privacy. So he's sitting with Dagny, and they're imprisoned in privacy. So working together is almost like a prison. There's something trapped about it. Only her hand lay in the light. So there's the naked skeleton hand we saw in the beginning with the crane, and now her hand's laying in the light. And then she saw the light that lights up this dark world and all this other stuff. So she gives him the list of all the people who donated to her company to help keep Rearden Metal going. And Rearden writes on there, okay, add me to the list, $1 million. And she's like, oh crap, you're going to do that? And he's like, listen, I take the biggest risks on my own business. I'm not going to ask you to take a bigger risk than I'm going to take. And he says, I therefore expect to make an inordinate profit, and you're going to earn it for me. So yeah, he wants to make some cash, right? He believes in this. Right? She says, yes, I think I'll earn your inordinate profit for you. And then Rearden says something he wasn't saying before. Before he was like, evil has to beat itself. And then he says, but we have to beat them. We will. So now he realizes there's something going on, that there's an enemy to be defeated, that this lunacy is not just going to defeat itself, that this crazy nonsense, this madness that he thought was so insane that it couldn't possibly do anything but destroy itself, he's like, well, we may have to beat that ourselves. Like, we may have to step up and get in the ring, which is different for him. He wasn't going into warrior mode against this. He was like, I'm going to just do my business and leave it alone. Oh, he says, what about your brother Jim's board of directors? She says, they're all scrambling to get statements in the newspapers to the effect that they have no connection whatever with the John Galt Line, and how reprehensible an undertaking they think it is. They think they agreed to everything I asked. So she's telling them what to do. Now she's pulling the strings from behind the scene, but at least she has the benefit of the American people in line. And, you know, obviously nowadays we have corporations where their agenda is lined straight up with the governments. We have like this corporate communism. But in this book, obviously, there's something better about capitalism than truly is going on in today's world, right? Like, we know capitalism isn't the saving grace that we're seeing it out to be in this. Like, we don't have the free market. These people don't really have the free market, but a wedge of light fell across her face. He saw the firm, sensual mouth and sharp outline. Then she leaned back a little, and he saw only a suggestion of its shape and the dark lines of her lowered lashes. So, you know, he's playing around and seeing these sensual things about her. He's having thoughts. Haven't I? He thought. So now he's thinking. It's dangerous when people start thinking, right? Since the first time I saw you, nothing but your body, that mouth of yours, and the way your eyes would look at me. If he said the lowest of all desires is my answer to the highest I met. So he's got this animal instinct that he wants to go after with her, right? He's having sexual thoughts about Dagny, obviously, and he's like, this is the lowest desire, right? As my answer to the highest I met. So his desire for her is a high one because he thinks very highly of her. He holds her at a large rank, but he's like, I want to do animal shit. And so he thinks this, he says, to bring you down to the things you can't conceive and to know that it's I who have done it. Remember, he wants a victory. We found that out in the last chapter. To reduce you to a body, to teach you an animal's pleasure, to see you need it, to see you asking me for it, to see your wonderful spirit dependent upon the obscenity of your need. To watch you as you are, as you face the world with your clean, proud strength, then to see you in my bed submitting to any infamous whim I may devise, to any act which I'll perform for the sole purpose of watching your dishonor, and to which you'll submit for the sake of unspeakable sensation. I want you, and may I be damned for it. So this is one thing I don't like about Rearden, right? I don't know his religious background, right? We're guessing something Christian because his wife said that joke by somebody at the party, and they compared him to a crusader, which is, a militant Christian, somebody who's going out and fighting like in the Holy Land and crap. And so this guy's got this very strict and self-disciplined view of like this animal desire of his. And I get the desire to tame that, but it's like to sacrifice this world of pleasure and sensuality for something beyond it, or to try to tame the spirit and its need for expression in this world, is a bit ridiculous. It's got them all pent up. I mean, the guy clearly is hurting. He spoke, and she looked at his face in the lamplight. The lamp was outside her field of vision, and she felt as if it were his face that illuminated the papers on his desk. His face, she thought, in the cold, radiant clarity. So something about the cold, making things clear, freezing things, giving them some sort of form, chiseling them out. And so basically you find out they both have these sort of thoughts about each other. And they said the line of a ruthless asceticism is how he's described. So asceticism is like the religious doctrine that one can reach a higher spiritual state by rigorous self-discipline and self-denial. So he's definitely in self-denial. He's denying the desires of the flesh, which are actually just a spiritual expression. So the whole point of the spiritual vision is to experience and create and manifest the physical sensation of the spiritual thing. And he's messing around with that, right? So, here we are. We go into a freight train accident. So there's a freight train accident on the Atlantic Southern, and basically they're shipping copper and things go bad, and he borrows some hoppers from some train hoppers are like things that carry like commodities, and he borrows them from Taggart, and he gets these trucks on, it was a different rail line that was carrying it, and he goes and gets his copper. And then his mom comes, right? So he's dealing with all this BS, and his mom shows up at the factory during a workday. And a single thought cut through his mind like a spotlight, making him unable to conceive how any eyes could miss it. But he knows nothing about the steel business. So his mom comes and asks about his brother having a job at his facility. And Rearden's like, this dude knows nothing about the steel business. Like, what are we even talking about here? He can't work for me. And she's like, well, he wants his own money, and he doesn't want to live off your hand receipt. And so be compassionate and give him a job. And Rearden's like, have you thought about his mother's like, have you thought about his spiritual needs and what his position is doing to his self-respect? He doesn't want to live like a beggar. He wants to be independent of you. And he's like, by means of getting from me a salary he can't earn for work he can't do, which obviously is a bit ridiculous. Now, I think, if your brother was nicer and wasn't helping out Friends of Global Progress and working against you to get this Equalization of Opportunity bill passed, maybe you'd teach him how to do the job, right? But like, why would you waste your time on this guy who's in your family, you're supporting him, and then he's actively working against your interests? And then you funded him because you didn't know what it was. You just wanted him to feel good. And he basically is like, Ma, is this a fraud? Are we just do you just asking me to commit fraud and just put my brother in there and pay him? And she's like, you're the most immoral man living. You think of nothing but justice. You don't feel any love at all. And, so she's being all pissy and babying Philip again. And his mother finally goes, what are they, your mills? A holy temple of some kind? So now we get to it. The body is a temple. We've been getting to the skeleton. That's like the big Judaism thing, right? Rebuilding the third temple. That's their big thing. Solomon's temple, rebuilding the third temple, the temple, the house of God. And now we have Rearden being ascetic, right? Being self-disciplined and rigorous. And then we have him being compared to a Christian crusader who are conquering the world for the Jews to inherit it again in the future, right? And Ayn Rand's Jewish. So she obviously is familiar with this line of thought. And so she's letting it bleed into this book a bit, we can see, right? And he says, why, yes, he said softly, astonished at the thought. So just wonder, it's like, yeah, my work is my holy temple. There is something spiritual about it. And that we can all get behind, right? And his mother says, that's your cruelty. That's what's mean and selfish about you. If you loved your brother, you'd give him a job he didn't deserve, precisely because he didn't deserve it. That would be true love and kindness and brotherhood. Else, what's love for? If a man deserves a job, there's no virtue in giving it to him. Virtue is the giving of the undeserved. So now, if you don't deserve something and you give somebody something they don't deserve, that's what virtue is. See, this is the twisted kind of like logic. It's like, I don't deserve to go to heaven. There's all this in Christianity, right? I don't deserve to go to heaven, but, Lord, I don't deserve you. Like, again, I'm not Christian, so that's not what I believe, but like there's a lot of that in the Christian religion. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I get it anyways. And Rearden, luckily enough, is not subscribing to that. So maybe he's being mislabeled. The look on her face astonished him more than all the rest. It was a look of defeat and yet of an odd, sly, cynical cunning, as if for a moment she held some worldly wisdom that mocked his innocence. The memory of that look remained in his mind like a warning signal telling him that he had glimpsed an issue which he had to understand. And I think this is almost the same issue that Dagny is running into, right? The issue is that you can't go through life ignoring the social question and the fact that people's self-interest is driving things and that you have to deal with that somehow. Other people are working their own agendas against you. And just because they're not rational agendas, just because they're irrational, and they may be toxic to you in some way. And so that's why I think his intuition lights up. He was facing his next caller seated in front of his desk. He was listening to a man who pleaded for his life. The man did not state in such terms, but Rearden knew that that was the essence of the case. So this guy is running a harvesting company, which means he uses the steel that he would get from Rearden, and he uses that to turn it into plows and tractors and all this other stuff or equipment for farmers so that they can harvest the goods we need to eat. So this is a pretty important job. And he's out there in Minnesota and he's like, listen, he's like fourth generation, fifth generation, like his family's owned this place. He's keeping it going. And he's like, no matter what, he's like, I'm begging for your charity. And Rearden's like, you know what? It's so little to me. It's so much to you. Why don't I just do it? So he's thinking about this and he's thinking, wow, he and Dagny Taggart now stood in empty space, their way cleared, free to finish the job. They'll leave us alone to do it, he thought. The words were like a battle hymn in his mind. They'll leave us alone. So he's like, maybe they'll leave us alone to do our job, which we know is probably not the case, right? And you got this guy talking to him and he's like, and all the while, Mr. Orrin Boyle was swearing to me that he was going to deliver the steel next week, but whatever he managed to pour went to new customers of his. For some reason, nobody would mention, only I heard it whispered that they were men with some sort of political pull. And now I can't even get to Mr. Boyle at all. He's in Washington. So there he is out with his Washington boys, telling this guy and telling Taggart Transcontinental he's going to deliver them all this steel, and he never delivers, right? But somebody's getting the steel. He's giving it to somebody. Somebody's pulling the strings here. And this guy goes on, I think there's something phony about the way Mr. Boyle runs his business. I can't understand what he's after. They got half their furnaces idle. Last month, there were all those big stories about Associated Steel in all the newspapers, about their output. Why, no, about the wonderful housing project that Mr. Boyle's just built for his workers. So he's like, is it about their output? He's basically saying, I kind of misread that, but about their output, He's like, no, it's not. It's about this like housing project this guy's built. So he's like supposed to be producing steel, and he's, going on about, he's putting out colored movies about how great steel is, and he's building housing projects. Now Mr. Boyle's got a radio program about the importance of the steel industry to the country. They keep saying that we must preserve the steel industry as a whole. So basically, we can't, it's the too big to fail 2008, 2009. Let's bail out the big banks because it's too big to fail. And everybody who screws around and isn't productive and just takes your money and spends it carelessly and invests it carelessly and, does all this shady shit and takes out all this money, right? What do? They then screw you over at the end. And that's what he's saying. Like, all of a sudden, we're going to save it as a whole. But this guy doesn't understand that. He's just trying to do his work. And he goes on, do you know what it's getting to be like out in Minnesota when the farmers can't get tools? Machines break down in the middle of the harvest season and there are no parts, no replacements, nothing but Mr. Oren Boyle's colored movies about, oh, well. So he's basically just like, Oren Boyle sucks. He's not helping me out at all. The John Galt line, he thought, if he could do that, he could do anything. So Rearden's like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to help you out. Rearden thought it's so much for him and so little for me. So his mom's there accusing him of basically being not compassionate because he's not giving to somebody undeserving. But here's Rearden actually being compassionate and saying, you know what? Let me help out a guy. His furnaces are full. He almost can't afford it. And yet he calls his superintendent and he finds a way to get this guy his steel. So then we go into this other point, and the secretary comes into the office, Gwen Ives, and she's like, her face is distorted, and she's usually very businesslike. Her face is serious. She doesn't let emotion get in. But now she's distorted. And like, what's distorted, right? Like a change in the form. So to twist out of shape, to twist out of form, right? I thought I must tell you that the legislator has just passed the Equalization of Opportunity bill. So she's all stressed out. And now they just passed this bill, which screws Rearden over and screws their production, because now he's going to be obligated to either produce less or share more with other companies or whatever that may be, right? Whatever the government mandates about that. So we had businesses transact. Didn't we, said Rearden? Mr. Ward could not define the emotion that contorted Rearden's mouth as he spoke. So now there's contortion, which is to twist a wrench out of its usual form. So the form that we had, the structure we had, is now being transformed. It's being changed. He studied the figures, making some brief calculations. All right, Mr. Ward, he said, you will have your steel in 10 days. All right, so 10 days, there it is. He's going to give this guy a steel. And then he says, wire Fleming in Colorado. He'll know why I have to cancel that option. So Rearden was going to option the copper mine so that he could get copper because he was having problems getting his copper shipments. And now he's going to have to cancel it because he's not allowed to own more than one business interest. So that's BS. He would think of it later, he thought. It must not stop me. So he's thinking, it must not stop me. And then his secretary says, I could have taken the rest of it, she whispered, but they're calling it a victory for anti-greed. So now all these people are losing their jobs. These people are being screwed. The union members are being forced not to work. People aren't being able to ship their product out of Colorado, and they're calling it a victory for anti-greed, even though nobody's going to be able to get the goods that they need, including these farmers who need to get the food. He laughed aloud. I can see where such a distortion of the English language would make you furious, he said, but what else? So again, distortion. Everything's being distorted. There's a loss of twisting of form. Something's not right. It was past midnight, bent over blueprints of the bridge. He stopped his work abruptly because emotion reached him. So Dagny and him are like the bridge, right? He's still sort of working on this connection here. And emotion reaches him. So emotion reaches him as he's working on the blueprints of the bridge. Obviously, the emotion's about the Equalization of Opportunity Act, but it's also about, on a deeper level, it's about this connection with the feminine. Conscious of nothing but pain, a screaming pain without content or limit, he sat not knowing whether it was in his mind or his body, reduced to the terrible ugliness of pain that stopped thought. Now he saw that in postponing this moment for hours, he had not been guilty of evasion. He had not thought of it because there was nothing to think. Thought, he told himself quietly, is a weapon one uses in order to act. No action was possible. Thought is the tool by which one makes a choice. No choice was left to him. Thought sets one's purpose and the way to reach it. In the matter of his life being torn piece by piece out of him, he was to have no voice, no purpose, no way, no defense. So that was a really good definition of thinking. To act, but he can't act, to choose, but he can't choose, and to define purpose. but he's already got that defined. So only the chance to act, which is all one needs. Now he was contemplating impersonally, and for the first time, the real heart of terror being delivered to destruction with one's hands tied behind one's back. So this bill takes away his ability to act. He's realizing now that there's something freaking sinister going on. And there's no point thinking of that. There's no use. What for? And that was Danconya's line, right? Like, what for? What am I doing this for? That was his favorite question. The sign at the end of a long road said Rearden Ore. It hung over black tiers of metal, and over years and nights, over a clock ticking drips of his blood away, and blood he had given gladly, exultantly in payment for a distant day and a sign over a road. Paid for with his effort, his strength, his mind, his hope, destroyed at the whim of some men who sat and voted, destroyed at the whim of men whom he had never seen and who had never seen those tiers of metal, destroyed because they so decided. By what right? So he did all this bullshit. He busted his ass since he was 14. He made himself out of nothing, out of the mines. And now they pass this legislation and they take it all away, or they cripple him for. And he's like, I'm helping Gwen Ives, I'm helping Mr. Ward, I'm helping all these people, right? But he's like, for relief, for renewal, or courage, to whom could Rearden look for it? He wished he had a friend who could be permitted to just see him suffer. Of all the men he knew, was there one he wished he had beside him now? He heard the answer in his mind, immediate and shocking: Francisco d'Anconia. The chuckle of anger brought him back. The absurdity of longing jolted him into calm. That's what you get, he thought, when you indulge yourself in weakness. So d'Anconia came to his mind, and intuitively, we're going to say that Rearden's wrong about d'Anconia, and d'Anconia is telling him, like, I'm not you're going to have to figure out what side I'm on, but you're going to eat those words pretty much. And now we know he wasn't happy with Dr. Stadler and his bullshit going to work for that government organization. So is d'Anconia really a bad guy, or is he just playing the part right now? So because he's got something larger in the works. I'm thinking something larger. And he says, he calls her and he says, Dagny, that bridge of ours, throw in the ash can, all of it. Because I figured out a trust that will beat anything ever built. Your bridge will carry 4 trains at once, stand 300 years, and cost you less than your cheapest culvert, which is just a drain or a pipe. He says, you see, it's a matter of combining a truss with an arch. Okay, so truss is something like supports a roof or a bridge. And obviously, the arch is kind of a different symbol here, but kind of like the shalom, the peace. Not really sure where she's going with that completely yet. But that was the end of the chapter. So we found out a lot. We found out that Dagny found out how to play the game a little bit and realized that there is a difference between her rational ways and the way that the world operates, and that she needs to be a little bit more cunning if she's going to get things done. And as a result, her and Rearden built a bit of a romance here, and now we have the death theme running through there. So something's been changed. There's a death to their childhood innocence, to their little world of rationality, the form that it used to take. Now we've realized that there's a couple different worlds competing here, and we may have to go to war against them if we're going to win. But we've also been polarized, right? Like, which is, we're not taking the middle path yet. But it seems like Dagny's trying to, like, I'm going to be rational, but I'm also going to play this, and I'm going to combine them into a balanced structure, into an equilibrium, so we can get the job done. So she's kind of playing both sides here, which is kind of good. And we'll see. I mean, we've gotten a lot of good definitions, a lot of good stuff, and chapter 8 should be fun. So we'll see you there.